to just say to people gathering, we're almost ready to start our last of this module. And Jim was saying that he feels like some people aren't really getting the conceptual aspects of theory and philosophy. And
Well, let me make that clearer. When I say
Yeah.
not really getting, I don't mean they get some idea of it, but they don't get it completely. I mean, they don't get it at all, to the point where they'll just shrug their shoulders and won't discuss it.
I see. Okay, good. Very good to say. And I'm asking Jim, speak up when you feel people aren't getting it. And then Jeffrey, you had your remark to make that I would love everybody to hear and for it to be on the recording, and then we'll be ready to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm talking about this same article next Friday.
Personality change article.
Yeah, theory of personality change with my first year program. So it'll be the end of the first year program. So they're, pretty solid focusers, and they've been reading Jen Lynn's FOT book. And I know it's a hard article. I've read it many times, and I still don't think I have a complete command of the article. And so I'm going to sit down and write a little something for them, just saying, read what you can, enjoy what you read there. You'll understand something. It's not about understanding everything. And when you read something that you don't get, do a little focusing with it. Just let, give yourself the opportunity to sit with something and realize something more will come there. It's not about a complete understanding to begin with, at least. And, I think there's this sense of we either get something or we don't. And I think there's a whole lot between that. Because I want them to have fun with this. I don't want them to feel intimidated and like they want to give up.
I think people can focus on the experience of being intimidated and get a lot out of that. So if they avoid that feeling, they're not gonna find out about it.
And there can be something there about the intimidation being an aspect, right? And that the focusing attitude can help us to bring that intimidation into the other side of it, which is sort of the excitement of it. So there can be sort of a lot of strands in the experience of maybe getting a glimpse of something, but not understanding it. And that being inviting as well as intimidating. So maybe that, I think what you're saying, Jim, is that feeling, and you're saying too, Jeffrey, that feeling of bringing the focusing attitude to the intimidation is maybe the first thing, to be able to focus with it and to be able to have fun with it, to be able to enjoy that murky edge that we enjoy with our personal issues in focusing with the theoretical issues, right? To enjoy the murky edge where we don't fully grasp something, and that being intriguing rather than pushing us away. Does that speak to your issue, Jim? Does that speak to what
It speaks to it, but then there's, as Jean would say, the action step where people actually do that.
Yes. The action step of bringing the focusing attitude to the theory, right? And I'm wondering, Jeffrey, if you would write, when you write to your students, will you send us your note too, to encourage us?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody. We're just getting started here, and I'm speaking to you from my place in the mountains here. We've had a week to sort of get this new place settled. So it may be a little discombobulated with noises in the household. And it looks like my Wi-Fi is holding up pretty well, but I'm crossing my fingers that all of that side of our class will go well. And I'm just very happy to see you, and very happy to have this sort of summarizing last class of this module. I want to tell you before we start about two things. One thing is that next year, I'm hoping that we can take this introduction to philosophy and introduction to theory and thinking at the edge, and we'll be emphasizing practice and seeing how the theory and the philosophy are enfolded in the practice, and how the practice is an expression of the theory and the philosophy. And I was saying to Jim that it's like this world of psychotherapy that Jean calls the big process. This world has the dimension of theory, the dimension of philosophy, the dimension of practice, the dimension of the thinking, feeling, focusing place, right? And all of these are implicit in each other. And so from whatever direction we come at it, we want to have the fullness of all of these aspects. Jim, would you reflect that back? Just Jim said it needs to be reflected back, and I said, will you do it?
Yes, I'll be happy to. That there are many different ways to look at an elephant. You can look at its tusks. You can look at its toenails, and psychotherapy is a very large animal, and you can look at it from all different angles. There are different aspects of it. There's a theory aspect, there's a philosophy aspect, and there's a practice aspect, and they are related to each other, and each show you different parts of it.
And each show you different parts of the other thing.
Of each other, yes.
Of each other, right. I love that analogy of the blind man and the elephant. And I always think of discussing that with Jean. I might have even mentioned it to you people, but maybe I didn't. And Jean said, yes, it's a wonderful metaphor, but we're not just looking at the elephant, we're eating the elephant. We're excreting the elephant. We are the elephant, right? There is, and that's so primary to Jean's philosophy. And it's a wonderful point to bring in here because there is no separation. There is no place from which you can look at reality. There is nothing that separates you from reality. You are it, and you are interaction with it. And that's such an important aspect of theory, because the way that we, let's just for simplicity say that theory is our way of thinking about the big project of psychotherapy, our way of thinking, the perspective from which we're thinking. And it can't just be that I'm here looking at therapy or I'm here looking at theory. I am the interaction with it. And how I think about it is going to shape how I experience it. And that's very practical. And we can see it from the point of view of philosophy, that we are interaction, as Jean says, right? We can see it from the point of view of theory, that that as we theoretically, as we process the more of what we're thinking about, we're embodying it, and it is informing the whole way we're being. We can think about it in terms of practice, that when I'm stuck on something, when I'm snagged, when the client is snagged, the perspective that I use to think about that very, very particular way that we're stuck is going to determine how I experience it, whether I experience it as, oh my God, how am I going to get through this session? This same old thing is going to happen. Or whether I experience it the way I can if I see a larger perspective that theory can give me. So I'm thinking about one of the things that Jean would always say, or did say, that when his client is angry, now this is a practice thing, right? When his client is angry at him and challenging him, his first reaction is, and then, oh, the client is getting stronger. They can express their anger. I never thought before today, actually today was the first time I thought about it. It's so exciting when you think something for the first time that you've mulled over or talked about or knew about for many, many years. I just thought today, I always love that what Jean is saying there is a theoretical thing, right? He's saying our first reaction may be the defensive self, the small self, the client's client that gets scared or frustrated or something. Then when he thought, oh, the client is getting stronger, that's a whole theoretical picture, that the client being able to express anger or a challenge to the therapist is a getting stronger, and that a getting stronger is what we want in therapy, right? That's a whole theoretical perspective. And he gets a glimpse of that. That's like theory as a mother, right? The mother pats Jean on the shoulder and says, oh, something good is happening. It's okay. And then he can go, ah. So in my little sketch here, theory is changing a reaction to a response. Theory is broadening the perspective so that we can be reassured enough in the little self to be this bigger self that can embrace the situation. And it's that perspective that does it. Will somebody reflect that back? Anything that I said just there, because I really want to go on and tell you what we're going to do next year, but I want to make sure that
I can say what I got from what you're saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I'm in a situation, let's say I'm listening to somebody and I'm shocked by a reaction that they have towards me. And my immediate thing is, whoa, but then I have a theoretical perspective and framework from which to view this reaction, which creates a shift in me and broadens my perspective of what just happened and of that person, so that we can continue in tandem, so to speak. I'm not separating from them. I'm including them.
Yes, thank you, Greg. That was wonderful reflection. And that when there's a shift in you, maybe you don't even say anything, right? Maybe you're just quiet. Maybe the shift is happening in you. The shift is happening in you it's going to happen in the interaction, and it's going to happen in the other person as part of that interaction. So even without or before anything is said, there's going to be a change. And that's sort of part of what Jean was talking about in that personality change article, right, Jeffrey, that you want your students to have fun with, that the change happens in that moment of shift. A shift in the therapist makes a shift in the interaction, makes a shift in the patient. Does anybody have any reflection on the idea of the blind men and the elephant, that we don't have a platform from which to see reality or to see the elephant? Anybody have a thought about that, or can reflect that, or did that make sense to you?
Well, what I relate to it in many ways. When I, many years ago, finished my psychoanalytic training, as if one ever finishes it, about 3 or 4 years afterwards, I suddenly understood I was understanding what I was doing. And, oh, that's what they meant. So for me, it's so important to allow myself to know that I don't necessarily understand, and it doesn't move into wisdom until I've given it time and had the experience and applied it and learned from it and walked around it and flown over it and gone under it. And then suddenly my body knows what it means. Then I understand it.
Right. That you are in interaction with it. And I think you went further than what I said in bringing the part about time, that you may not be aware of how you are part of it, how it's entering you, how you are entering it, how you are in interaction with the theory, with the thinking, and until a certain until it's cooked to a certain degree, and then, oh yes, I've been relying on that, just like I must have been implicitly thinking about Jean's process. And it just occurred to me today that that's what theory does. Yes, thank you. Okay, now I'm going to go back to what I wanted to say originally, which I'm so happy, where one of the things we need to do is sort of slow down and make sure we're all together. Next year, we want to have a complete course. It will be broken into modules, but I'm hoping people will take it from the beginning to the end on the integration of practice and theory and philosophy, and show how each of these are implicit in the other. But it will be a lot more about the practice of focusing oriented relational psychotherapy, a lot about how we use these ideas of genes in practice, but also bringing neighboring ideas from relational psychoanalysis into it for one of the modules, and hearing more from you about places that you get stuck, and looking at the theory and the philosophy from the practice vantage point. The other thing that I wanted to tell you about, Jim and Jeffrey are both part of, and maybe Vivian will be part of this new project of having a focusing oriented therapies YouTube channel. and we're putting more and more of, gathering more and more of the videos about the varieties of focusing oriented therapies on this new channel. And I would love you to go to that channel. Jeffrey, maybe you could put the URL in the chat, or you could, Jim, and subscribe to it and follow the process. And we'd love you to, be part of this in some way. It's a very exciting project of gathering our whole community of focusing oriented therapists together and sharing our wisdom as we've gotten it from Jean and as we've carried it forward in different directions.
I would love to have Jim do that because I was looking for it this morning and couldn't find it.
I was hoping you would do it because I was looking for it because somebody asked me for it yesterday. I said, oh, it's right. And then I couldn't find it either.
Well,
So-
I think that if you just type in focusing oriented therapies, it comes right up, at least on my iPad, as a new channel. And then maybe you could put the URL. I'm sorry, my technology skills are as backward as they are, but we will get it to you. I think we need a breath, and maybe as we enter more fully into our last class of this module, we might need a few breaths and maybe somebody to lead us in centering. How about somebody who hasn't done it before that would like to just, it's a 1 minute experience of just leading us.
I can do it, Lynn. This is
Thank you.
Beth.
Hi, Beth. Thank you.
I will invite everyone to sit back against whatever you are seated in and feel the support of your chair or your pillow or your sofa. And ask your body to let go of everything, every tension that it may be holding at this moment. You may close your eyes or look down at the floor and feel the breath enter your body from your throat or your nose and move up and down through every cell of your being, slowly and comfortably and reliably. And just take a few seconds to experience that. And as you do, notice what's going on with your other senses. What do you feel in the air around you or on your skin? What can you hear? Is there a scent that you're aware of or a particular taste? And if you choose not to open your eyes, what are you seeing with your eyes closed? And now just check from your toes, moving up slowly through your ankles, your calves, your knees, the rest of your legs, your lower trunk, front and back, your midsection, your chest and your back and shoulders, your neck, your jaw, your head, your scalp. And take one more easy breath and gently bring yourself back into the room.
I'm wondering if anybody feels a difference after Beth said that, after Beth let us, I'll make my volume up a little. Um, I think it's a very easy question. Do you feel a difference in your body, right? How many of you feel a difference in your body? Everybody, right? That comes right away. But I wonder if there's a difference in your way of thinking, in your capacity to think. I know that for me, after Beth did that, my sort of my mind opens up. As I relax, I can think differently. And back to that paper that we studied and that Jeffrey is going to teach about personality changes. A manner of experiencing is so important, so essential to the whole process of change. And I'm including our work here as change. We're changing in our growing in our understanding of focusing oriented therapies. And the manner of experiencing that we have here is so essential. That openness. Before we started the class this morning, when Jim and I were the first ones on, and Jim was saying that sometimes people are, many of you heard this, that came on right after that, sort of throwing up their hands and saying, oh, I can't think theory, I can't think philosophy. And that's a manner of experiencing. And we were talking about how the manner of experiencing the theory and the philosophy has to have the focusing attitude in it to change the feeling of being intimidated to the feeling of being intrigued. I sort of like the way I said that. I'm going to say it again. We have to, the focusing attitude, David White always does that in his poems, right? He says the same line again. So I'm going to be David White now for the moment. The focusing attitude can change the experience of being intimidated by theory to the experience of being intrigued. Does that seem right? I see a few of you nodding. Some of you aren't quite sure. You haven't bought that yet, but you could chew on it and see if I'm right about that. So the summary today is to talk a little bit about Jean's theory and Jean, and then for us to focus together on our own implicit theory. Some people say that theory, because it can be so constraining if you have the kind of theory that tells you what to do, you know, like the what we used to call in the 60s, the pig parent, that tells you what to do and tells you you're doing it wrong. And some people say, well, we need to be only with the experience and be theory free. And I'm saying, in my opinion, it's impossible to be theory free, because theory is part of our experience. We're always making sense of our experience. When we experience something implicitly, we have to reflect on it and make sense of it. We have to have concepts for it, put it into words, articulate it, in order for that experience to be memorable, in order for us to be able to really process the experience. So we're always, theory is part of us. We're always working from, being from, interacting from a perspective, what we think about things. And thinking deeply about theory, thinking from the felt sense about theory, is our way of having, I like to say, it's our way of having integrity as therapists, being integrated, so that what we think and how we're being are one thing. We're not saying, oh, I'm working from this theory and thinking about it in a disembodied way, but we're being and living the theory that we are as part of our experience. Now that's a tall order, and that's a growing process over time. Winnicott said that theory has to be in your bones, and yes, it has to be in your bones. But that comes as we grow. We grow in our perspective, we grow in our thinking, we grow in that integration of how we're being and and how we're thinking about how we're being in our lives and in our work. There was somebody, and I forget who said it, that thought about the process as role taking. This was a psychodrama person, so everything is about the role. Role taking, role rehearsing, and role creating. And in focusing language, we wouldn't talk so much. We would talk about roles more as stuck process. But that idea of taking something, rehearsing it, and then creating it, I think feels right to me. But it's also sort of like the elephant. It's also that it's taking you, right? In the rehearsal, it's making you, and then it's creating you. So there's this interactive process where the theory is who you are. And as you grow as a therapist, your understanding of who you are and how you're being and why you're being that way, right? Theory explains it, Jean says. Jean said in that wonderful video that I always assign you, Jean said, you know this as focusing-oriented therapists, but this theory explains it. But we need to have the explanation to really know it, for it to really support us. In the past, I've said theory is a map, theory is a lens, theory is a framework, theory is a mother, right? And theory, now I want to say, is such an intimate partner in our work. It holds us and inspires us and guides us. And we have to be in constant dialogue with our theory. We have to be able to challenge it the way you challenge a good parent. We have to be able to add to it. Somebody said you should never leave a religion in the same state that you found it. And I always think about that in terms of theory, that we shouldn't leave our theory in the same state that we found it. We're always carrying it further, and who we are as individuals, that very unique person that you are, is going to have a very particular take on any theory and be crossing it with everything else in your life. So it will be uniquely yours and you'll be carrying it forward. But that basic framework, perspective of theory is something that you find. and something that finds you and becomes an intimate partner, or Don Orange calls it an inner chorus that is with you all the time. So Gene was such an example of this. Gene was his theory. Gene embodied his theory. There was no separation between how he talked about therapy or life or anything, and how he was being. Not that, of course, he had, he had his mishigas, as we say. Can anybody translate mishigas?
Craziness.
Craziness, right. He had his craziness, and of course, the craziness, maybe he didn't theorize that particular craziness. I'm not saying that Gene was a saint, but what I'm saying is that his way of being was an expression of his way of thinking. So I want to give a few examples of that. I don't, how many of you were there on Monday for the helpers group when Joan Claxburn was reflecting on Gene Genlin? Raise your hand high. Laura was, and Natty was, and Dorothy was. Anybody else that I missed? Jim, you were? Yeah.
Vivian has her hand up.
And Vivian, hi Vivian, you were there. Were you there, Jonathan? No, I don't think you were there. It was wonderful, and it will be on YouTube, and it will be on the new channel, the
Oh,
online
good.
channel and the new channel.
Great.
And you can see it. But she really captured so much about Gene in her reflection. And it felt so good to me to sort of felt like visiting with Gene when Joan was talking about him. Do any of the rest of you who were there want to comment on it? Was there anything particular about that for you? I'm curious, Vivian, how it was for you, because you never met Gene Genlin. How was it to hear Joan talk about him?
It's like, I have the opportunity to know more about Gene, and it's like Gene become more vivid for me. And also I remember, I think it's Barbara talked about the 15 projects.
Oh, yes,
And-
yes.
Yeah, right. And I remember she said that Jean told her that you have not done anything, or something that you have not done, and that actually give me a kind of different image about Jean, being a colleague to work together, for business project. And
Yes,
that's fun for me too.
yes. Right, that was a different side of Gene, that he so wanted to change the world, and he wasn't good with business projects, and was always frustrated about how can I get these changes made in the world. Yes. Any of the rest of you? Jim, you met Gene, right? So you met Gene. No, you didn't.
Nope.
So how was it for you to hear Joan talk about him?
I enjoyed what she had to say. I don't think I could say more than that.
Mm-hmm. And
It was unique. That's not, she talked about Gene in a unique way.
in a unique way, yes. Natty, did you have anything to say?
Yes, yes. I just loved what Joan shared and what everybody shared, everybody who knew. I didn't know Jen Lynn. So it was like, as you said, Lynn, he's living what he said, and he's living his theory, and because that's where his theory came from his living it and feeling it. And it was so great for me. I loved for example, these details that he couldn't care less about how he was dressed and how he was, and it talked so much about what was really important for him. So to me, like listening to these different details was so important. It kind of made a bigger picture for me of him and how everything integrates, and how he really lived his theory and his thinking and his sensing. I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
And Dorothy?
I did too. I enjoyed it very much. I'm just holding now the image that I know, Lynn, you have mentioned, that I hold this image dear of, but Joan mentioned it again, visiting him, and he loved to sit by the window, and just his connection to nature. It's just such a humanizing, beautiful image, and I'm just holding it within me.
Right. And I think, Laura, you said you were there? No.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
there, and I'm trying to remember content, and I'm like, oh, I can't remember content, but I do remember feeling so impressed with Joan, because I've heard other people talk about Jean Genlin, and she just got these themes of his life, and there was such continuity. And yet she also invited people who were there, who had to bring in their stories. So it's like, wow, I would recommend it for myself to listen again to also.
Yes. Did I leave anybody out that was there? I think we got everybody. But the reason that I'm asking you is that I think that there's so much of the theory in the person, right? That there isn't a separation. And I wanted to give you some examples of that. Joan was reminding us, or telling those of you who didn't know Jean for the first time, telling you for the first time, Jean would say, if the individual isn't sacred, nothing is sacred. And so live that, and that's so fundamental to his theory. Jean said that the individual always comes first. I want to, let me see if I can do this with you. You know the four things that I said every theory responds to? And I asked you to think about your own theory in relation to it. The first thing in those four things was, who are we as people, right? What is a person? That's the first one. So Jean's basic understanding is that the individual is sacred. And what does sacred mean? That's a word that some people would not use. Too religious. Other people would love that word. But when Joan talked about how Jean was, we can get a sense of what he meant by sacred. And you can get a sense, even if you didn't meet Jean, in the demos he does. When he would do a demo, that person was the only person in the world. That's all he cared about. He didn't care about making a point, or although he did make points from it, but the person always came first. And he would go until that person had gotten enough before he would stop the demo, even if it threw the whole conference off schedule. When Joan talked about how when she would come into the room, he would look up with this look of recognition that she felt like she was the most precious, prized, special person in the world. And that Gene had that with everybody, including animals. He had that with the cat too. I remember his greeting the cat with that same, wow, this unique, special creature. And the sense that the person is much more than the way he would say it theoretically, and we're trying to bring this into the theory, is that the person is more than the content. The content is your personality, your history, all the things about you, your traits. A person is more than all of that. And you could see that in the way that he looked at you. I mean, Gene would never, ever refer somebody to another therapist and say, you know, this is a depressed, anxious young man. He would never do that because he wouldn't think of the person as an anxious, as the content. He would see that specialness of that person. Even to say he's a young man, I don't know that Gene would say that. He would find the way of seeing that person.
That's a good question.
Yeah, please.
I don't know Gene's background other than philosopher, but do you think that there's a certain advantage if I'm assuming that he wasn't really trained, you know, as a psychoanalyst or something like that. So he, in a way, maybe he came to it unburdened.
I think that his psychotherapy skills and formative theory was in the tradition of Carl Rogers, who was
Right.
a therapist, right? But he certainly knew psychoanalytic theory very well. But of course, it was not the psychoanalytic theory that we know today. It was a much more archaic psychoanalytic theory that he was familiar with.
But I guess I'm saying that, you know, a lot of us have had it drummed into us, borderline. No, oh, that's a narcissist. Almost like astrology. Sometimes I think about it, you know, a Libra with something rising. and we have to unlearn a lot of stuff.
Right. I think what Gene would say there is that it's not about unlearning it. All of those categories can be helpful. You know, we think of all people. We put people in all kinds of categories, and the categories can be helpful to us. But we have to take them with a grain of salt. We don't think of the person as that, right? I mean, we can talk about Americans. An American is like this. And when people talk about Americans, the blush, or maybe I'll smile, or, you know, we are our categories, and we are much, much, much more than our categories, and often we're not our categories. But I know what you mean there, Liz. Like I'm an artist, and I never went to art school, and with other artists that went to art school, I felt like I had a much easier time because they had to unlearn so much that they learned in art school before they could begin to express themselves freely. And I never learned that stuff, so I could express myself freely and learn what I wanted to learn. So I know what you mean there. But that would be the kind of theory that constrains you. But it's also your attitude toward these things. I want to tell you a story that I don't think I've told before, but I think it might express some of this. When I was a young therapist, I was in supervision with Jean and studying psychoanalysis, and very passionately involved with my clients, of course. And there was one client that I felt so gripped by and so wanted to help her. She was always on the edge of suicide. And I was just taken with her passion and her brilliance. And I so wanted to help her. And I, as a new therapist, I became very over involved with her life and my boundaries weren't very good, and she wanted me to be her friend, not her therapist, and I didn't know enough at that time. We had gone through many stages that were productive and good, but I had said, okay, I'll be your friend rather than your therapist. And so I stopped the therapy, and I was going to meet her as a friend. I wanted not to have the authoritarian role, right, of the therapist. Then she became more suicidal, of course, and I was at my wit's end, and I felt so terrible about myself and so humiliated that I was such a failure. And this person that I really wanted to be a good therapist to, I had failed so utterly. And what I did was very radical. I asked this young woman to go to Jean with me and to talk about where we went wrong and to get consultation from Jean. So I brought the client to see Jean, and she told Jean from her perspective about herself and about what had gone wrong in the therapy. And then when I saw Jean privately after that, and with the client, he was like so there with her, so intensely there with her, picking up everything and just paying that kind of wonderful attention. And then he said to me, I feel she's going to be okay. I feel her life force, and I feel the force of your relationship. And the only problem was that you ended it, you made it a friendship. It's not a friendship, it's a therapy relationship. And it's going to be okay. And you're doing a good job. I don't know if he said I'm doing a good job, but he was very encouraging. Maybe he did. All things considering, you're doing a good job. And just stay with it. And I felt so relieved. And it gave me such a sense of courage and a sense of, oh, I'm not this horrible person, this horrible failure. I just got a little too enmeshed there. And Jean gave me this perspective of fully embracing who she is as a person that's more than her issues, and also the sacredness, if you will, of our relationship that is a therapy relationship. And there was something about his way of being that communicated to me in such an immediate way the individual is more than their content. The individual is sacred. And the therapy relationship is more than the content too. Therapy relationship is this living, breathing interaction, and we are this interaction. All of that was communicated to me implicitly. He didn't say that, of course, in a theoretical way, but the theory was all in the way that he was with me and with her. Does anybody have any response or feeling or question about that? I'm realizing that I gave that a
I
little.
do. So I'm always thinking about, I always have an oppositional reaction. That's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to own that.
Uh-huh.
So I have an oppositional reaction that I have content, I can tell you.
Mhm.
And the content's always valid because I am smart enough to
Mhm.
make good points about many things.
Mhm.
But then the overreaching or overriding aspect is an oppositional thing. So when you're talking about Gene and how he looks right at you and, you know, how all this Gene stuff, I can kind of, so my first thought is that's what they say about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, there's a certain kind of star quality. I'm trying not to use the word narcissist. There's a certain kind of star quality where they look at you and you're all they see and they make you feel wonderful. And I was thinking about this image of Gene sitting, talking to people in a house and loving the trees outside. And I was thinking, who's cooking dinner for everybody in the kitchen? It's not a man. It's not, there's some woman or group of women in the kitchen who are making the treats and the dinner. And that, you know, and I'm just so cynical about so many things, but I can't get beyond the gendered part to begin with, you know, that, and it's so gendered. The great man, it's, yes, there are some women who have fallen into that, and you could say the same thing about it, but really it's like 99%. The great charismatic man who has this luxurious position of, and everybody thinks that he's just wonderful because, you know, the term now emotional labor, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
And not just emotional, the real labor.
Right, right, right.
So that's my cynical
yes.
feminist
And Gene would
view.
Gene would my inner Gene is sort of glowing hearing you say that. Yes, 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 that's all right. Yes, I know that. Right. I think that what I'm, and you were right that my partner, who's a woman, was in the kitchen when I was looking out the door at the big system. She was in the kitchen making the bagels and lox sandwiches. But the point that I'm trying to make alive using Gene really is the point that theory is what it does, how it lives. And if Gene looked at someone intensely and they didn't want to be looked at, that wouldn't be what we're trying to talk about. We're trying to talk about what does it mean in living to deeply believe that the individual is more than their content, that Gene as an individual is more than his male privilege, right? That we are, each of us are more than our role as therapists. The client is more than their role as client, you know. And how do these things come together? That's
one thing,
what-
Lynn, that is missing for me. Gene Ganlon is like a mystery. I tend to think that we develop our theories of living or ways of living from the bottom up. That is, we have experiences as children, at school, through our jobs, through our career, from important people. And all those interactions give rise to our living and to our experiencing and to our ways of being in the world.
And to our thinking,
And
to our theory.
there are other people who have a top-down view. That is, they're brilliant writers or theorists, and they expound a particular approach or theory, and we don't know the connection between their experiences and what they've written about, how we come to it. So when I look at Gene Genlin, I can't see much at all about his private life. How did he come to be who he is? And that creates part of the mystery for me, because I'd like to know him better and how he got to his ideas, but I'm stymied.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, there is stuff that I've said and stuff that people have written about his history. He wasn't one to talk a lot about himself personally, but he wasn't adverse to it. But I want to say there, Marvin, an important point that you're helping me make, that our experience, our lives shape, influence how we are and how we think, but also it's bottom up and top down. It's not one or the other. And it's what's Gene's philosophical perspective is that it's a zigzag, that there's an experience that shapes how we think about something. And that may happen implicitly. We may not know it. The psychoanalysts call that organizing principles. We may not know that we're reacting this way because this is what we experienced in childhood. Then there's also being gripped by something that you read or hear, or something in the zeitgeist, and say, yes, that's true. And it filters, it comes down into your way of being and into your experience. And in focusing or thinking at the edge, there is this zigzag of feeling into the experience that's implicit, that we haven't yet put into words, and bringing it to this level where we can think about it. And then taking our thinking and feeling down into it and seeing, what does that really mean to me? How is that? What is that? And that's what we're trying to do in this class, is this zigzag of bringing the life experience to the thinking, and the thinking back down to this implicit feeling, sensing, nascent, rudimentary experience before it's actually born. And that's why I'm bringing Gene's, the things that Joan said about Gene into it, to try to make that link better for you. The link of the person, the living, and the thinking, and the philosophy.
No, can I say something?
Please.
I just, I'm wondering from what Liz said and Marvin said, and my own feeling is sometimes that you talk about Gene with such an idealized quality that, we don't really get a sense of who he is and where he might have stumbled or had a flaw or done something imperfectly or something. And sometimes I'm feeling like you're attributing so many of your ideas to Gene that are really your ideas. I think.
Well, That's
I
very
think a lot of
interesting.
what you're saying sometimes is you, and it's really not Jean, you know.
Well, I think that in terms of how Jean is living in me, right? I
Right.
don't know if I can always distinguish that, but
Yeah.
because
I mean, yeah,
my
you
living,
have internalized him so thoroughly, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and I think Jean's ideas are amazing, truly, and it's a tribute to him that you carry his work forward. But I think really a lot of it is your ideas too, and the way you integrate things, and you don't really take much ownership of that.
I think when I think in the YouTube channel, we'll be having more dialogues about how we disagree with Jean. And next year, I'll talk much more about how I differ from Jean and what I've carried forward from the psychoanalytic world that he disagreed with.
Okay.
But, right, and I agree with you about the idealization is the way that I've taken in the ideas through this lived experience, and then I'm trying to give you the ideas through the lived experience rather than just the papers. But I can see that it has a downside to it, right? That
It has a downside a
has
little
a
bit.
downside to it.
Feels like
Uh,
really more
yeah.
of how
I mean, there are
wonderful he is.
many ways that I could talk about Jean's Mishigas and difficulties and traumatization and all kinds of stuff. And I don't, that's sort of in a different realm. And it isn't that I am not aware of those things, but the Mishigas doesn't take away for me from the living of the ideas that nourish me.
Yeah, they're really amazing, and they have transformed my practice, the work I've done with you, and the link to him and his ideas for sure. And more than my practice, my life, as you say, we're interactive in all levels. It just, you never can draw a line or a boundary between this work and that work.
Yes.
So,
And I'm very, very happy about the challenges, because the challenges are part of the ideas, right? That the ideas need to be able to be challenged. The challenging is part of that alive dialogue, right? Not just holding something as this idealization.
Right.
The idealization needs to be there. It's our way of looking at the incredible colors of the flowers or whatever. It's our way of taking in the universe through our living. But it can never be at the expense of our challenging and disagreeing and being upset with other aspects of a person or the set of ideas. Jean said all the, every theoretical framework is partly wrong, including mine. And of course, he knew that people that we would surpass him and carry what he's saying forward. But because of time, and I want to give you a chance to think about your own theory, I'm going to just say a few more remarks about things that Joan said about Jean and how it fits with those 4 questions that theorists ask. Does that seem like bypassing anything?
I have one question that's been eluding me for a while, and that is, what do you think, or why do you think Gendlin hasn't received the kind of credit in the world of psychotherapy that he might have, that you speak about?
I think he hasn't, because he was very suspicious of organizations um, and hierarchies, and the same reason that I said in the discussion with Joan, came to the psychoanalytic meeting with a rip in his shirt to, you know, it was partly a protest, like he doesn't want to fit in to some of those systems. And part of that perhaps was his experience of escaping from the Nazis at the age of 11. I mean, we could have many different ideas about that, but he had a lot of suspicion of organizations and also wanted to influence them. So he had a lot of conflict about that. But that would be
Could
one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Could I propose something too, which is, and this is just a speculation, that he wouldn't have had to be the one to make himself prominent and have his ideas continue. It would be other people. And if you look at the nature of his work and, for example, capitalism, where, you know, in focusing, it's just not a moneymaker in the sense that psychodynamic therapy, the cognitive behaviorists took over America, the insurance companies, the whole neurological basis that's now just really taking over everything. You know, there are very good cultural reasons why.
I think we could say lots of things, but I want to come back because I'm worried that my main point is going to get lost in our intrigue with Gene Gemlin, and that it's going to be that the downside of my bringing him in as a person is going to be greater than the upside of giving you a connection of the living and the theory. So I'm very aware of that balance. So I want you to be listening to me, not from the place only of being intrigued with Gene Gemlin and who the hell is this guy, but from the place of how ideas are manifest, the relationship of living and theory. So I'm going to go.
Lynn, can I try to weave some stuff together?
Sure.
So yes, I'm hearing that your intention of introducing Gene is not necessarily to point out Gene as a role model of sorts, but it just happens to be a particular instance of where there's a congruence between theory and the lived experiential practice. So I'm trying to cross that with the conversation that we are having, like in kind of with the topics that are arising. And like, I'm trying to look like, as each of y'all just spoke, I'm like, how is what y'all are speaking congruent with the theory? Like how is the way of being of what has been shared as I'm listening to Liz, Marvin, and where did you go? Arlene. Like I was listening for like, from what theory do you are you speaking from? Like what is the belief that is held? And I'm imagining in Arlene, in your share, there's like a theory around value, or a kind of I don't know what the word you would use, or with maybe with Liz, I'm imagining maybe there's some theory around like the feminist theory is alive in your speaking, and there's a congruence in your way of being and the theory of it. So I'm trying to milk and cross these ideas. I wonder if you can kind of help Lynn kind of make a pin here.
Yeah, I appreciate the link, but I think I want to hear the living theory against.
Okay, let's that's very helpful, Jonathan. Let's just
It's
mark
true.
that place.
It probably does come from some theory in me, right?
Yes, and that
Yeah.
one of our main purposes today is to make explicit the implicit theory. So Lynn's
Mhm.
feminist
Right.
theory that challenges Jean's male privilege to be looking out the window. Arlene's worry or not.
I have a theory that women idealize men.
That women
in some way.
idealize men, yes, and that maybe I'm giving Jean credit for my ideas, right?
Right, right.
That there's a wonderful theory there. Marvin's implicit theory that that
Come
we
from the bottom up and top down.
experience, right, of life from our childhood that comes up to, right, the bottom up, top down theory. So yes, thank you, Jonathan. I think
Yeah,
that
that's good observation.
right there. Yeah. So I'm just going to, you have to just humor me a little bit. I'm just going to say a couple of more things about what Joan said about Jean and how it fits into these four things. And then we're going to get to your theory. Joan reminded us of how many metaphors Jean had for the idea of having the right distance between oneself and one's issues. Remember now the idea that the individual is more than the content. And what's so important is for the person to feel that they have a relationship with the content, with themselves, with the implicit. That's in the idea of the client's client, right? In the idea that we are not our issues, we have our issues. That is so helpful to me as a therapist, that no matter what it is that we're talking about, the person is much more than that. And we, as the therapeutic pair, are much more than that. So Jean had the metaphor that Joan reminded us of, you know, putting your issues on a bench, for example, that I'm here and then I have this and this and this, you know, or being dancing partner with the issue. Here I'm suicidal, I want to kill myself, I can't wait until I gathered enough morphine to be able to just go out like a light, right? So I have that, but that's my issue, that's my self state. Let that be the dancing partner. I'm here and we can have enough distance and enough connectedness so that we can dance together. There's a me and an it. Or the metaphor that Joan liked best of, you don't have to put your head in the soup in order to smell it. A wonderful metaphor of having that sense that there's a me that's bigger and there's an it that I have respect for, a relationship with, maybe I'm mad at, maybe I'm all kinds of things. There's an it there. So that is very much about that being larger than one's content. The second of those four questions that theorists talk about is, what's wrong with us as human beings? Every theory wants to answer that. Jean's answer would be, I'm giving a tiny little thing of something of us being interaction, and the interaction gets stuck. And then like a plant is implying, there's the occurring into implying, what we are is implying what we need, and that occurring isn't happening. And we're a process of like a river trying to get that water flowing into the ocean. So that second question about what's wrong, Jean's way of seeing that is that this process that we are gets stuck. And the third point that theorists ask is, what do we as humans need? And Jean says, we need the carrying forward, the process that our living is showing us. And in that little story about his seeing me and my client, it was like, it's happening. Just have faith in it happening. There's that sense of what we need is a furthering. And this is an important part of Jean's theory. The articulation of something is a furthering of it. That to explicate our implicit theory carries it forward. To be able to find a name for something, to find a way of visualizing it or image, is the articulation. That's the carrying forward from the stuck place, and it's going to move in little steps. And just the last thing about, what does the therapist do to help? Jean says it's our way of being with the client and helping the client be with themselves, this articulation of what's implicit, the naming that can be recognized, that manner of experiencing where we're recognizing something that is the way that the major way that therapists can help in that, the being, the interaction that can make it better. Let me just see for a minute. What else? Oh, Jean saying to the client, and it's on one of the tapes too, I'm happy to hear from it. That idea that the worst stuff, that you could be happy to hear from it, because that means that there's this interaction of you and it. When we're hearing from our worst fears or our most angry rages, we're hearing from it. And there's a relationship between the me and the it. It's being received, which is such a major part of the interactive process of receiving. Receiving makes everything different, right? When something is received, it changes it. Let me just see if there's anything else that Joan said about Jean that I think I can end that little experiment of putting those things together there. I think I probably left out some important points, but I want us to spend our last half hour thinking about our own implicit theory. So let me just take a couple of comments from you. Then we're going to take a 1-minute break, and then we're going to see what your implicit theory is. Okay? So a couple of remarks about this last part. And let me hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet.
Oh, I think I have spoken, but may I say something?
Absolutely. You haven't spoken in a while.
Thank you. So this thing about having the theory and living the theory and embodying the theory and then making sense and and living it in another way. I can give a very clear example of what happened to me just these past days. I've many times I read this chapter on where Jen Lynn speaks about it fills itself in, and how these stopped processes are implying, and when we are the kind of interaction that can make that move forward. And I had read this many times, but then having experienced that with myself, like having had the experience of being with something that was stopped, and then because I was the kind of interaction with that could let that implying continue and move. Then when I read this again, it made so much sense, and I could, it was like really living the theory.
Yes. Right. It's a wonderful example. And it made sense to you that it was your way of holding the stuck process could be the filling itself in, the natural process. Yes.
And then it made it so much easier and natural to be in that way with somebody else, to maybe, I don't know if the word would be help, but to really be the kind of interaction with that other person that would
make it better,
make it happen and make it move forward.
Right. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I can share something. When the field of trauma was just growing, and I had a number of clients, and I was working in the Civil War in Guatemala, and they had lost any connection to spirit. And I was concerned with how do you get somebody reconnected to spirit without putting your religious or spiritual beliefs into the system? And I went from one religious leader to another, and they gave me wonderful advice, but it was also very skewed. And I heard about a California psychic, and being a bit doubtful but desperate, I went to her with this exploration of how do you do that? And to make a long story short, she just looked at me and said, live life congruently with what you believe, and people will automatically want to know what you know that they don't know. And that opens the door. And it works.
Right. That you heard from her about living what you believe, your theory, opened the door for you. Anybody have any remarks while we're waiting for someone to come back? Laura, what about you? We haven't heard from you, and we haven't heard from Nettie.
I do have something to say, and I've been holding back because I missed our last class. But I keep wanting to say, just tying together what we were talking about earlier with the elephant, that we have our implicit theories, and unless we're mindful of them, we always have theory, I guess, whether it's explicit or implicit. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I love that point, Laura, that we're always have theory. And when we don't explicate our theories, then we're working from theories that we might not agree with. I love the bumper sticker. I don't believe everything I think, but in some ways, right? we think things from early experience, like Marvin was saying. We have early convictions, And we don't even know where we think that, and we're responding. We're responding from that implicit theory. And so the carrying forward, making explicit our implicit theory is such an important part of having theory as and not being upset when our theories disagree with each other, right? Because we can have parents that disagree with each other. Jean says then the child is free when the parents disagree. But we can think further from the implicit theory to make it explicit and know more what we're responding from. Anybody else that
Then I have a question.
No, Marvin, not
I'll
you.
hold it. I'll hold it.
Hold on to it. I want to hear from people who haven't gotten a chance to speak. I hope you don't feel pushed away, Marvin. I appreciate you, but I'm needing to gather in the quiet people here.
I have something I'd like to share. It's not completely related to what you were just saying. It's more like really appreciating the group discussion about Jean and raising the idealism of Jean, and just thinking about all of that. I've been thinking about it a lot and not knowing how to process it in myself. So I just wanted to thank people for bringing that forward and just helping me get a little clarification. I was talking to Steve Moskowitz, and he also helped me. And Marvin's idea of like, we really bring the childhood experience into, we can't remove the childhood experience to who we are as philosophers in the current state of affairs. And what I came to realize is that my resistance so much comes out of idealizing Jean, was so much out of my religious background, this strong fundamentalism Christian background, that I had to believe a certain way. There were no options, which very early, yes, I knew something was wrong, but a 7-year-old doesn't exactly have the power to say, I'm walking out the door of this church every week. So I realized like just putting that together helped me understand why I was resisting Jean so much. I mean, there was such a strong force. I couldn't understand the force of it. And then what other people said, Lynn, I knew you before I did focusing, 2 years ago, and would hear the self-psychology self speaking for years. And so I realized I was so missing, as I said in my email, I was so missing that part of you. It's funny, like though, when something comes up that you really want to express, and like over time being in class for the year, like having these strong feelings and having like 3 or 4 of you just, represented what my experience has been, pieces of my experience. And I'm really grateful for that, for just having that piece of discussion, because you can have philosophy, but you're always bringing yourself and your own history into the scene.
Dorothy, this is BJ.
Yeah.
I was in some focusing training with you a long time ago, and I've always enjoyed your comments and your reflecting. And hi, Lynn, welcome back. I just wanted to ask you, when you said that you had known Lynn before focusing in the self-psychology arena, and that there were some things you missed. Can you just give me one example of the kind of Lynn that you experienced before that you miss?
Wow, that's a wonderful question. Well, Lynn did come to my course in focusing with Charlotte and did speak out of the relational, more of the relational piece. And we've had articles, so I've definitely dipped into it. But I think Lynn expressed it when she said, I don't know if I'm bringing my psychology self into the course. I mean, it is a course on focusing. So in my head, like, I say to myself, well, it's a course on focusing, but let me see if BJ, if I can get, for me, there's a breadth in self-psychology, and there's this rich history. And I want to integrate Gendlin into that rich history that I know Lynn has. So coming from knowing Lynn from that part, I was just missing that part of Lynn, because the way Lynn related to Gendlin many years ago, that's how I was telling Lynn, my mentor is Dick Geist, and like that's how I relate, and Donna Orange and some of the self-psychologists, I just, my heart and mind and soul embraced. So I don't honestly, BJ, know how else to express it. That's how I met Lynn. So I just missed that part of her, because I also.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I didn't put you on the spot about that. But,
no, I hope I was clear. I hope that made some sense with that kind of response.
Well, it's just been such fun to be in these courses with you guys, and to see how so many of us come again and come from very different backgrounds and interests. And we are here with Lynn. So Lynn's takenness with Mr. Gendlin is just, for me, another curiosity and a sense of kind of wonder about the Lynn that does have such breadth. But to just be pointed about it, I have experienced something in me, you might say, but I want to say I have experienced Lynn Preston in group leadership as one of the kindest and most gracious and most diplomatic leaders I have ever sat under. These 50 years I've been sitting under people. And so that's what I am interested in when she speaks about Mr. Gendlin is, so these are things that have shaped her and helped her. Y'all, Lynn is an old lady, and she just gives herself and gives herself and gives herself away in these realms that I just find so lovely. And I don't care about Jean Gendlin at all. I'm just interested in Lynn as a group leader. So that's it for me. Thank you, Lynn.
So can I ask you where you're from and all that?
I spent most of my working career in Connecticut. So you could say I was from Southern New England, but y'all know better. Yeah. I grew up in the American South.
And are you a therapist? Or?
I'm not. I'm a spiritual director.
Can I ask you? I don't know if it's appropriate, but since I don't know, I'm wondering what kind of spiritual director, like with.
I'm currently endorsed by the American Humanist Association. I'm a humanist clergy person.
That's great.
That's because I was kicked out of being a United Methodist minister, and then I was kicked out of being a Unitarian minister.
I'm hoping that I'm so sorry. My computer did something. Now I have you on my iPad, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to know each other much better as time goes by, and you'll get to know BJ. And BJ, being a spiritual director, there's a lot of theory that's so important in that. It's such a delicate profession. And when it was very interesting not being able to speak, but hearing your comments, there for a while before my iPad took shape here. Let's not go to the place that I had wanted us to go, which is our implicit theory and making it explicit, and leave that till the fall, when we get back together, because it feels like there's so much that is right here about the whole issue of what our class is and people's relationship with me. I wanted to make a couple of comments about idealization, because that's been coming up, and Dorothy was missing my psychoanalytic side. So I can say that I've thought a lot about idealization from the perspective of self-psychology, and Kohut talks about idealization as one of the three kinds of nourishment that people need for well-being: mirroring, twinship, and idealization. But idealization is such an important concept, because it has that underside that makes parents and makes for oppression. And it's our basic need for inspiration and guidance. But then, in order for it to not be a blind idealization, it needs to be able to be challenged, and it needs to be able to be it needs to be able to be what it's for, needs to be able to be for the inspiration, and not to be something that we're obedient to or constrained by. And I feel like the idealization is a way in which we are representing, channeling, if you will, the larger system, the big process of therapy or group leadership, whatever that is. And that we have to know that we aren't that, but we're representing that, and we're being that. Some part of us is that, and to allow it, but also not to get identified with it. So that's my little self-psychology spiel about idealization. But I go back to Jean, because Jean was really in that ballpark in saying, when the client says these things about me, these great things about me that I don't even recognize, I know that the client is right. They're talking about a bigger Jean than I know, right? And sometimes people are talking about a bigger Lynn than the one that I know, but it's right, because all of that big stuff is in us. But it doesn't mean that there isn't also very little stuff, like Jean talking about how he felt like he was some kind of monster that he was surprised Carl Rogers could relate to. That can all be there too. But I think that the theme of idealization and my wanting to communicate something of how the idealization of Jean becomes a theoretical holding for me. I think that we're needing to talk about the underside of that. So I'd just like to hear from a couple of other people that we haven't heard from.
I think I've learned tremendously this past bunch of classes about theory and how it relates, and and now idealization, which goes back, you say, to Kohut. So if we're having, I think if we're having issues maybe about idealization, maybe it does go back further to relationships with our parents, not being able to idealize them or have to idealize them, or rebellion from it, so it's just such a rich, you're bringing up so many rich areas to explore for me that, I feel are really impacting me personally, and also my working with cases and clients over time. That, when you said like takes time to do all this, and it's like a cooker or something, and I was thinking, yeah, for me it's a little bit like my slow cooker. I put it on in the morning and it could take all afternoon to make the beans or something. So it's a bit of slow process, but definitely it's getting there. So I'm just
Great.
so
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
stuff. Good. Yeah. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
maybe in the fall, we'll talk more about idealization is such a big topic.
Yeah, and the how that how Jean's concepts are related to other modalities, other theoretical modalities, because I hear attachment theory. I hear a lot of different theories, and process theory. I would love to hear more, and distancing. How do we do that as therapists? How do we work, in ourselves and also with clients to get that, to achieve more of that?
To get that right distance.
Yeah, from the content, from the emotional, dysregulation, or
to be
whatever.
listening
Yeah.
To the more, and not get stuck in content.
Yes. Yeah. And I just wanted to say one other thing, and I don't know if I'm really off base with this, but I'll be fast. But I'm working with a woman who's hoarding, and she says that she'll pick up the envelope. She maybe has a whole stack of envelopes, but her whole house is full. And make a long story short, I want to put it down. I want to get rid of it, but there's something stopping me from doing that, and so I just put it back. And her house is it's ruining, her life, kind of. Yeah, it's ruining her life for a long time. But so I just thought, well, there's a process there that you're going through. What is it that you're experiencing that's stopping you from doing that? And she says, I think it's grief. I think I'm filled with grief. And so just understanding that stop process, there's more there. Was, I think, moments there that might have gone,
yes,
that's
wonderful.
Somewhere.
Yes.
So
I wanted to say
we're working
one
on
thing.
grief.
Sorry.
Yes.
It ties in. It really ties in. It ties into.
Just a minute, Liz. I just wanted to further what she said a little bit. That the next thing there is, she says, I think it's grief. And then this, I think the theory is this is coming there, but it needs to be connected. So the idea of saying, well, can you find that grief?
Okay.
To make the experience, the man experiencing, to be so happy to hear from it, but then to ask the furthering of it. Can you find that grief? What is it like? Go ahead, Liz.
What I wanted to say was what just happened between, Betsy and you. I hope there's much more of that when we start again, because I find that the theory gets so ethereal and vague to me, really kind of vague, and gets restated and restated and restated about this interaction and this process. And I know for me, I want to bring that helium balloon down to earth, because I'm more earthy than ethereal.
Right.
And just now, which was a kind of supervision, is really what I would love to have more of. How do you use this stuff with people?
right. Well, that's where we're going to be going in the fall, the actual experience. And we have to start with we have to also put our implicit theory in there because we didn't get to it today. But we're going to be doing that in the fall. But you know what I would really appreciate if people would, all of you, every single one of you, would write to me about what you want more of, what you got, what you didn't get, but what you are wanting and needing. That will help me greatly, and I'm going to give a lot of thought to how we proceed in the fall, because I'd really like that this whole next year to be a sort of complete something about integrating relational theory and focusing oriented therapy. So you guys can help me a lot there.
You know what I would like to share is that big difference that I was teaching Ericksonian hypnosis in Egypt to 32 Muslim, mostly women, just 2 men. And I had anxiety. How was I going to be with them? But in the teaching and what I learned from the theory and from you and the interactions that we've been having is that moment of being the interaction and that crossover point where you're crossing over. And that's what I focused on the first day, finding that unspoken experience, that implicit way of finding out where they were and how I could speak to that. I found it by the end of the first day, and we were there for a whole month doing different trainings. We had a fabulous time. They want us to come back. They want me there 3-4 months out of the year. Mainly though, that moment of realizing I can be the interaction, but then I have a fine tuning to meet the other person where we will meet.
Right.
And there are lots of false starts, but you can see it on their face, you can see it in their body, and you can feel it. I could feel it in my felt sense.
Right. And
We're
so Steve, you're helping us there to say, let's start in the fall, right, to where we are, to meet each person's, and you'll help me by giving me ideas about what you want to hear more about. But and Liz, about the interaction in the group that is we're being, right, that brings it, the helium balloon down, that meeting where we are and seeing how the theory and the practice can help us there. Anybody else who hasn't spoken? Jeffrey, I'm wondering what in your being here as a teacher as well as a student, if there's anything that you have to offer about how it's been or what you might want in the fall, or any comment there.
How it's been. It's great to read the articles, and I can't always say I've been the best student and the most prepared, but I mean, I love this stuff. And what I look forward to would be, I think in my teaching as well, there are okay, but how do you do this? And there's always some balance of, for me, working with answering practical questions and really getting people to see how you use the theory as an anchor, to look at Gene's work and to see he's really talking about attitudes and how certain attitudes anchor us. And I had one client or student who said, what do you do about a client that just repeats themselves? And then I talked about you know, the interaction, like it's one interaction. And she came back the next week and she said, you know, I sat with that client and I was just present and everything changed. And so there is this lovely interplay that I'm still trying to figure out how to bring forth in my students and what I. So yeah, more of that is interesting.
Right,
Practical,
great, thank
helpful.
you. Right.
One question, just when Betsy asked about her hoarder client, and she said the client said she thought it was grief that contributed to that, and you said you would have asked, can you find that grief? I'm wondering what the theory was. What would be the line from the theory you were carrying?
Oh, thank you for that.
Gone that way?
Yes, thank you for that question. That the felt sense is the thinking feeling, and it came as a thought that was a bit abstract. She said, I think it's grief.
Right.
And when someone says that, they don't quite have it yet. So then you're always working with the implicit and explicit, and then going down to the relationship with the self. Can you find that is a way of saying there's a bodily felt sense to that makes the experience immediate and will carry it forward. Can you find it? It's a way of bringing
bodily sense that you want her to connect with.
Right.
Thank you.
That whole idea of if somebody is going on and on and on about something, Jean would say, is that here now? And the person would say, no, that happens when blah, blah, blah. Oh, can you bring it here now? What is it like? Right? It's that would be the manifestation of this theory. We'll start
to the body, into a felt sense.
Right. We'll start with the practice and then see the theory from it.
I would like that a lot for next year, as other people are saying as well.
Good. Any last remark before we have to stop? I would love us to continue communicating through the summer. Any thoughts and ideas that you have that you might want to send to everybody else? You're very. We can have a shared email list so you can share with anyone else, and you have your little study group too that Marvin organized, so we can share our thoughts and ideas through the summer. Okay, people, I will hear from you, and I'll see you in September.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Hey.
Thank you.
Bye.